You are watching an episode in our Landlording A to Z series, where we walk you through the steps, skills, and challenges involved with residential rental real estate investing. We share our expert advice, including the tips, tricks, and strategies we've learned over years of managing rental property. Please subscribe to our channel to get notified each time a new episode comes out, and please like and share our content with people you know who might be interested. Thanks for watching.
Hello, you have Chris and Eli here from Landlord Gurus, and today we are recording episode number 10 of our Landlording A to Z series, where we take you through our breakdown of all the way from deciding to invest in rental property through all the steps and tasks of operating the property. So today we are going to be talking about writing lease agreements. Prior episodes, we went into advertising and fielding interest from potential candidates, screening, and then actually approving or denying applicants. So here you are, you've chosen an applicant, they want the place and you're good with them. So here's where you need to be careful and to make sure that you have the appropriate rental documents. So local, state, and even city laws are changing rapidly around the country, having to do with landlord-tenant rules and laws. And it's increasingly important that you know what your local laws are. So a few things that are changing and differ between jurisdictions that you may want to watch out for, and this is not an exhaustive list, but some of them that you're going to want to watch out for is how you handle deposits. For example, in Seattle, move-in costs overall cannot be more than 2 times the monthly rent, and you cannot have more than 1 month's worth of rent in refundable security deposits, fees, and any other type of deposits, whether refundable or not. So you need to know how to handle those. Occupancy levels are something that you need to pay attention to as well. The occupancy rules here are fairly liberal as well, where you can't say, that only 2 people can live in a space. So, don't write into your lease agreements things that are not legal in your area. And then this is a little bit nuanced, but just cause eviction or just cause termination of tenancy is an issue that's coming up. And what that means is that you cannot terminate a vacancy unless you have a certain number of reasons, and they are kind of missed payments, certain number of violations. And in Washington state now, even if you write a fixed term lease, you're required to offer an extension unless you have one of these approved reasons for terminating, for saying, I'm not going to offer an extension. I'm not going to extend the term. So those are the types of things that you want to make sure you're clear on before you write your leases. And then you also want to know about any documents that are required. So many of the cities around Washington have their own landlord-tenant law pamphlets that you have to include. Around the nation, probably most places, you're required to include the EPA lead-based paint pamphlet or a disclosure if you know anything about it. Mold addenda. Here we're supposed to send people registration, voter information. So just know, again, harping on it, but know what you need to do and according to your local laws. So.
Exactly. And I think it's a good point to just kind of emphasize, maybe you don't go, depending on where you are, you don't go grab just the easiest free downloadable lease template that you can find, because they're going to be different and you're going to want one, specific to your state or particular to your particular locality in some cases.
Yeah.
So there's ways, we'll get into this later, but there are ways where you can ensure that what you're getting is right for you, and it's important to do so. So
yeah,
you'll hear us harping on that probably quite a bit, but yeah, state-specific leases are your friend. But anyway, just kind of to reiterate, it's the way that you protect yourself and the way that you and your tenant have the rules and responsibilities down on paper so that there's no misunderstanding later on, because that's where you get into the big headaches, is when, people are there and they don't understand what their responsibilities are and what your responsibilities are. And if you can get that out of the way up front, I think it generally leads to a better outcome down the road. So
yeah, good insurance.
Yep, exactly. Also remind everyone right now to like and subscribe our videos. You can go to our channel and hit that button and you'll be reminded anytime we come up with new ones and when the next one comes out in our Landlording A to Z series. So anyway, yeah, we'll get back to leases. So the basics that you're going to want to look for on your lease, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you are finding one to use that you find somewhere else. But just make sure that all adults are on the lease and that they all sign it. If you've got, 2 roommates, they both have done their tenant screening, they both qualify, they both get on the lease. Don't just leave it to one person, and make them responsible. So the next one is all your rent amounts, including fees, deposits, any other things that they are paying for, that those are listed on the lease as well. And specifically what they are for. Make sure that there's something in there that talks about the tenant responsibility for keeping the property in good shape and good repair, that they report problems, that they are responsible for their guests, things like that. In some cases, it might say that they can only have guests for X number of nights. Beyond that, then, additional fees might kick in. So again, make sure that what's included in the tenancy is on there. If that's parking, if that's storage or utilities or, bike parking or, reserved parking spot, anything like that, that's included in that rent amount that gets included on the lease. You're going to want to determine what type of lease term it is, whether it's a monthly agreement or whether it's a term agreement. Meaning, does it just go month to month and it just keeps renewing every month, or whether it's set lease for 12 months or 6 months or 9 months or whatever. And then, along the same lines, then it's got to describe what happens when that lease term expires. Does it revert to month, or does it end? In some cases, you can have it just end, and it's up to both parties to decide whether they want to extend it or not. So those are certain things that should be in that lease agreement. And again, that follow your local regulations as well.
Yeah, and again, it's not a comprehensive list necessarily, but those are the basic things that you are going to want in any lease. And then, there are lots of specifics to either a property or applicant or your situation that you may want to include. So, if there are pets, there may want to be a particular pet agreement, and it should be called out on the lease that a pet is either allowed or not allowed, or if allowed, then which pet or pets. Utilities, who's responsible and how are they to be paid. We'll do another video down the road on different ways of dealing with utilities, because there are a lot of different ways, but there are ways of divvying it up or direct billing, but it should all be spelled out. Do you use a bedbug addendum? I do now, because it lets the tenants know that if they go on the camping trip and they come home and now they're bed bugs, and that I didn't cause that, and they need to manage it. Depending on what your smoking policy is, you want to have something in there, either in the lease or, as with many of these things, in a separate addendum. It is what I use just to reinforce the rule. There's a form specifically that says there's no smoking allowed on this property or by anybody who lives here. So that I use a specific addenda for that. Also, there's a crime-free addendum that I use. Again, it's redundant. It should go without saying.
Pretty self-explanatory, right?
Yeah. Don't run a criminal enterprise out of this property. But, if nothing else, it's just made clear.
Right.
Is it okay for them to sublet while they're a tenancy? I always say no without prior consent. Whether or not renter's insurance is required. That's a really important one. And actually, just last week, we got notice that our insurance company wants to see evidence of insurance from each of our renters so that they'll continue insuring us. So, the insurance landscape is crazy out there, and it's always good practice to require renter's insurance. Another addendum that you may want to use is a parking addendum if there are particular rules of arrangements around how that works. So again, not exhaustive, but that's a good example that these are all things in the spirit of making this document specific enough to apply to your situation, the tenant, and the property, and making everything clear.
Yeah, and it's a good idea to think about the types of uses that could potentially be something that might cause concern, whether it's all the things that Eli talked about, or also, are they allowed to run a business out of it? That's common nowadays when people are buying and selling stuff online, is do you want to let people sell a bunch of packages, or, use your facilities or their unit to receive packages and send packages as part of a business, things like that. But yeah,
or use your water to make kombucha.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
right. You can get really specific, overly so, but it's worth thinking about things.
Exactly. And then you're also going to think about some other custom clauses or specific house rules. You often hear them called that way, but things that might be specific to your rentals, like quiet hours. Are you going to require quiet hours between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. or something like that? Or what happens if a tenant loses their keys and they get locked out, or they get locked their keys inside? How are you going to deal with that? I will often, they can try me, and if I'm around, I can come let them in, but it's going to cost them a fee. Or if I'm not around, then it specifies in the lease that they got to call a locksmith, and that cost is they've got to take on that cost. Things like that. Some house rules might discuss the use of common areas, like laundry, what their responsibilities might be for that, or what the hours are for that. Basically how that kind of stuff works, because it's not the same from place to place. Outdoor space.
Use of outdoor space. Can you have furniture out there? That type of thing.
Right. Yeah. Can they have bonfires? Whatever. Yeah. Satellite dishes. Like, can they install a satellite dish on the unit? Are you gonna let that happen, or more types of specific things that might apply just to your building, but something to think about and what you are going to allow. Can they drill holes, to get the cable installed, whatnot?
Water beds and fish tanks.
Water beds, fish tanks. Yeah, exactly. It's often a good idea just to say no, but and then guidance for parking, and particularly if you've got a garage, do they get a key fob? How does that work? What happens if they lose their fob? Do they have assigned spots? Things like that, again, specific to your place, but there might be considerations to think about and to have it spelled out in the lease so that once they move in, they're not calling you on day one, or they've got a problem with it and say, this isn't what I originally was thinking was going to be the case. So take care of that upfront.
Right. So that takes us all the way through covering all your bases, thinking about the specifics of your property and getting a real thorough agreement in place with your tenants. And you also, at this point, want to make sure that you document properly if there's a guarantor involved. So that's commonly known as a cosigner as well. And if you have required somebody to have a cosigner, or maybe they don't have credit history or some other factor, then you require that to be sure that they could meet the obligations, have a kind of a backstop, then you may need to make that official. And it's a very simple form. It's signed by you and the guarantor. And essentially it says, I promise to pay the rent, meet the obligations of this lease that these tenants are signing if they can't do that. So get that in writing and make sure it's official, because you've got nothing if you don't have it written down.
Exactly. Yeah. Then you've got all your documents, your lease documents, all your addenda, all their agreements, disclosures, everything else, lined up. You got to get all this stuff signed. So in the past, you print everything out, have 2 stacks of papers. And, I was looking recently, like the Seattle lease with all the addenda and agreement, it's like 30 something pages.
Yeah.
So, you can do that in person. You can print it all out. You can meet up, sign everything, give them time to read everything over, initial at the bottom of every page, all that kind of stuff. And some people still like to do that, but all that can be done electronically nowadays, and that's what we recommend. There's platforms, products like DocuSign or AuthentiSign or various other ones like that. Hello Panda, I think I've seen.
Dropbox, I think Dropbox has
do that as well. Yeah, so you can sign up. Usually there's a cost involved, but you can sign up, upload all your documents, do that. You can also use property management software. We talk about a lot of different ones that not only will they do lease signing, but they will also help you with a lot of the other aspects of property management, from advertising, rent collection, things like that. So you can do either one. I think, to do it online, to do it electronically. What some of these property management platforms also have are leases that you can use. They've got lease building wizards that some of them are state or locality specific. Some of them allow you to upload your own addendum and your own documentation in it. We've got articles on our site that talk about the differences between a whole bunch of them and which ones we like and which ones we use and think are the best. But there's all kinds of one. We actually partner with a company called Azebo to help get you access to state-specific lawyer-approved leases. So there's some great options out there. Check it out.
Yeah. And they do, one thing about Azebo is that they partner with a lot of local housing association who often take it upon themselves to keep leases really thorough and up to date for their particular location. So you can actually get access to those through Azebo in some places. And then they also have the 50 state lawyer reviewed leases. I use Turbo Tenant, which offers the 50 state leases, which means that for every state, there is a lease template that's been reviewed based on the state's current rental laws.
Right.
It may not get all the way as granular as the city. So what I do is I download our local RHA of Washington. I download those leases that are really thorough, and then I upload them, I fill them out, and I upload them to Turbo Tenant where I can do electronic signature. So,
and what they will do, the beauty of that is then they've captured all the information from the applicant. And so once you accept them, it'll auto-populate that lease with all their information, their names, your address of your property and all that kind of stuff, so that you don't have to go back in and type it again, or, it removes the ability to make mistakes, really. And so,
right. I mean, it brings data entry time way down, because, once I send a link to apply to somebody who's seen the property, they put all their information in there. And I've already set it up for the unit, and they're applying for that unit. So the unit information is there. The applicant puts their information there, and then it's very quick. It's a matter of clicking as opposed to entering the same information over and over again.
Yeah, and once it's ready, then they can just click through and sign everywhere they need to sign, and you do the same. And everybody gets a copy of it at the end of the day, and it's there and it's stored. And we'll talk about documents in a minute, but yeah, done. So
yeah, and that's a nice thing too, is because it's stored in the cloud, then everybody has access to it when they want it, and I don't have to worry about security in my office where I'm storing either application information or the documents. it's all stored remotely where everybody can get to it. So.
Exactly.
So anyway, we have hammered that you have to have lease agreements that are specific to your locality. And you also want to give some real thought to the specifics of your property and what kinds of terms should be there. Parking, common areas, quiet hour, all those types of things that are specific, where you may want to set things up in a particular way, make sure it all gets into the agreement. And then we strongly encourage you to find some way of signing electronically for all the reasons we've just said. It's easy, it's fast, the storage is right there. We've written about many of the property management software companies that are out there, and there's some great offerings. We review which ones we like. We've actually reviewed many of them just in the context of lease agreements. So we'll post a link to that article and several more here for you to take a look at as well. And like Chris said, hit like, share with others, follow us, and we'll keep sending you these updates as they come along.
Yep. Stay tuned for the next episode where we talk about actual move-in process as well.
Right. Get them in the door.
Yep.
So, okay. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.